Millions of frontline workers keep our economy running and are provided with the latest technology to do their jobs. But digital adoption, especially by frontline workers, is really hard.
This is Frontline Innovators. We explore how to overcome challenges and achieve success when we empower our essential workers.
I'm Justin Lake.
And I'm Gene Signorini. Together, we speak with experts who are leading the way and driving digital transformation to the front line.
This podcast is sponsored by Skillful, on a mission to help frontline workers learn and use the technology needed to succeed in their jobs. Welcome to the Frontline Innovators podcast. I'm your host, Justin Lake, and we have another fantastic episode and guest lined up for today. Today's guest is the Learning and Development Manager for Great Day Improvements. Please welcome to the show, Justin Eubanks. Hello, Justin.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Love your first name. And in our prep call, we talked about the fact that somehow, some way, both of us have been called Jason throughout most of our life. So if either of us slip up today, that'll be funny and we'll have it recorded. But I imagine that's not going to happen. So really looking forward to this discussion. Let's start off as we always do and find out what you think is the biggest challenge facing the deskless workforce today.
Man, a whole lot. Communication, technology, face-to-face interactions. I think here with us, deskless means we're a home improvement company. So we have installers, we have the sales force, we have a large manufacturing force, and they are primarily out of the office. So reaching them and getting information to them as part of the communication is key. So we look at that and we strategically try to go through what is the best way to do that. And I'll give you a good example of, let's say, sales. So we are trying to offer sales training on our LMS. And if anybody's watching, that's a learning management system that they can log on to and read like modules and courses about sales training. And the traditional way, obviously, is going into an office, maybe with a lot of people, a large group. You have, your instructor is up there and he's walking you through the sales training. But now when a new sales employee comes on, what we want to do is push out modules that we've already done. And they are created by our national sales trainers. So they are curated to that specific brand. And that's maybe even that specific department or region. And then they'll go on there, they'll read the content, they'll go through it, and they'll have a test at the end. So the idea is if they can't make it to the office, maybe they're out in Colorado, as long as they have a computer somewhere, then we can get to that. And that is very, a very specific example because sales, you most likely have access to a computer, right? You have access to something, an iPad, a computer, a cell phone, because that's what primarily they have on them to do their job. But it gets even, I guess, tougher when you look at manufacturing, right? They're on the floor, they're on the plant floor, they're working these machines. Maybe it's a hot day, and that's going to last all summer. So how do we communicate and maybe tackle these skills gaps that we want them to have, whether it is like something like emotional intelligence or safety? How do we, go over compliance when they've just worked 8 hours on a hot floor and then we want them to come over and huddle for 10 minutes and we go over a compliance thing. So we look at all of this and we say, what's the best thing we can do? And our strategy right now is first, aligning what change management is throughout all the brands. That's very important, how you conduct this training and how you push it out. I had a conversation earlier with a coworker and we were discussing if you wanted to push maybe a new compliance or a learning management system or just communication in general, if you don't go through, basic change management steps, then that can be like a hit in front of you, almost blindsided. You're working that day, you're working all week, this new process comes in, or this new step, or something you don't know about, and it kind of throws everything off. And your day to day is just kind of shaken a bit. So our strategy here, specifically at Great Day, is to slowly evaluate, get people in the right positions strategically, and then work that change management. Sometimes it can go quicker in some areas, but sometimes it will have to be very slow. We'll have to get people warmed up to these ideas first, especially about learning. A couple years ago, we didn't have this. So to get employees to have a growth mindset, you have to first kind of encourage them and open up to this idea that we're going to offer it. So it's not here yet, but it's about to happen. And when it does happen, these are the things that you can do. So now it gets people curious, gets people talking, and in that time frame, whether it's a week to a month, maybe 6 months out, you can answer questions. They're going to be uncomfortable. They're going to be asking questions. What does this mean for me? What does this mean for my team? What does this mean for my brand? So you answer these questions the best you can, and you try to, I guess, comfort them with the idea that nothing's really going to change about your position. This isn't a threat. This is a motivational factor for you to excel. So that's change management right away. You have to do that. If you don't, then the odds are launching a project like that in the remote field, whether it's manufacturing, sales, install, it's going to fail. It just is. That's the odds. So you have to do that to set up a higher success rate. But once that time does come around and you do launch that, people are comfortable now. They're relaxed when it happens. They're relaxed when they see the LMS come across. They're relaxed when they see that memo or that email, because they were already aware that it was going to happen in the first place.
Yeah.
And that was a very long rant, but I think what I'm getting at is change management is so important in large businesses, even small, that to get to these back end workers that don't have access to, I can walk across, to the guy next door, to my employee, to the employees here at the office and say, hey, how are you doing? Let's talk about this. They don't have that opportunity.
Right. Well, man, all right. We've got a lot to peel back here. I've got already a few things highlighted. You and I were talking about before we started recording today. I have pages of notes from the first time that we met, and I already have now added another half a page just in the opening. So we've got a lot to talk about. Before I get into asking some clarifying questions on some of the things that you opened with, I'd like to just give the audience a chance to understand a little bit more about who they're hearing from. What is your background, and how did you end up in the role that you're in today in the company that you work at?
Sure. So in COVID, I was laid off home, and I was looking for a company that was challenging and growing. I wanted that change. As a explorer, I want to, if you know disc assessments, but the explorer creative type, you want to be challenged. You want that. You don't want to be sitting still. So I seen this role here. It was in manufacturing, and it was to help come in, create processes, move around the shop floor, and it was growing rapidly. We just acquired a brand, and the deal was to acquire, I think, two a year for something like 5 years. That was what I heard. So I got in here and I became the continuous improvement manager, where the idea was to go on the shop floor, improve things like ergonomics, and implement lean concepts, Six Sigma. But along with that was another lean concept called the change agents, where it's a group of individuals that are highly motivated that will conduct change on the shop floor. It's not a promotion, it's not a title, it's just a specific group of individuals that want change. They get very excited and motivated by doing things to help out. And we got that going, and I'm telling you, man, for a good 6 months, it was just this eye-opening experience of what a group of highly motivated and engaged people can do. So during that time, I kind of went from the route of these Lean and Six Sigma to this eye-opening. There is way more value in change and learning in this route here, especially this rapid growth that Great Day was doing. So at that time, we acquired another business, and we were growing rapidly again. We took on some more positions. We got a CPO, absolutely amazing, came from Boeing. So she came in and she was structuring people into positions to conduct this huge change management chain in HR, right? We were trying to conduct people to engage other people. We're trying to make it a people first mentality and culture. So at that time, I started to engage more into the HR side of things and partner with different departments for learning opportunities. The position opened up for learning and management, learning and development manager. I applied and I took that position. Since then, it's been a long road, Justin. It's been a lot happening.
Just in a couple few years too.
Just in a couple few years. The home improvement industry is not I don't want to say that it's this typical workforce that, if you go to a, like a Google or IBM, you have these, how you view them. It's similar to the home improvement. You have to kind of adapt to how they maneuver. It's high sales, and then after the sales, it's construction. You're building something, and we specialize in sunrooms and windows and siding now. So you have to adapt to that adult learning. And so inside of that, the first thing we launched was the LMS. How can we get something in their hands, right? So it was this quick education that they can go on there and take classes anytime they want, from Python to Microsoft, Excel. And that was the very first thing we launched. And then we've seen a skills gap, and that was the middle manager. I don't think that's talked about enough in learning and development. And especially in remote work, middle management is extremely tough. You're feeling that pressure from executives, and then underneath you're feeling the pressure from your employees. And you're trying to balance that. So that's, emotional intelligence comes into play, empathy, resilience, but also where do you go? So we're trying to engage that. So what we did was launch, and this was for remote workers as well. Most of them were remote. It was a middle management course once a month for managers called Great Day University. And we launched that last year, and we got a pretty good engagement of 100 employees per episode. So it would come on and we would teach things that the value of not only what we thought was valuable to the company, but what they wanted to learn. So things like P&L statements, finance, very basic things like that. We did do,
Basic things, but things that don't necessarily normally apply to, I'll say, lower level leadership on the org chart, right? They
yeah,
may, right? So that's a growth opportunity for them. I think you're picking up some signals then from your learner community about the things that are important to them that they see as potential for growth. Am I misunderstanding that?
no, you're completely correct on that. What we've seen in the feedback that we got was you would see like you perfect like just what you said, the lower level on the org chart, right? They were highly engaged. They wanted this very badly. Everybody showed up. The upper level, they're used to it. They see it. But the people that dealt with it sometimes were a little bit confused by it. They would engage in it, and they would have follow-up questions, and they would want more and more. So it was good to get that engagement, but it even got better when we introduced panels. So we would handpick individuals that were mostly remote, and a salesman that was on the road 24/7. I think he took that from a hotel. He would be on this panel discussing a certain topic. Very similar to like a podcast. You have this one subject, and then you have panelists just discussing and talking about how they view that in their line of work and their business. So you might have a regional operations manager that kind of oversees like install and jobs in his area. And on that panel, you might have, someone that's like I said, that traveling salesman, and then also maybe like someone from the plant floor, you know, like a manager from the plant. And they're all engaging in this one subject where they view that subject differently for themselves and their teams, but overall it's the same concept, right? Overall, usually it's the same answer. What they're getting at is the end result is helping your employees out and then overall the company in general. It was just super interesting to see that at the very end when we did the panels. And we're about to relaunch that here at the end of this month as well. So super excited.
That's really exciting. I want to come back to something that you said in the beginning. You talked about frontline workers and creating the learning experiences, and you talked about time. You specifically said, they go through an 8-hour shift and then they have these other obligations. And it
Yeah.
makes me think back to, the show is called Frontline Innovators. We're talking about frontline employees here. And part of my goal for this podcast is to help all of us think about the distinction between knowledge workers that are working in a corporate office versus the frontline employees. And that terminology is even stupid too, because it's not to suggest that the frontline workers aren't knowledgeable and using their brains for their job. So it's a
Right.
stupid distinction. I need to think of another phrase. But the point is, one of the things that's different between a typical corporate employee profile and that of the frontline workers is that those of us that are sitting in offices and cubes aren't typically being managed by the same types of metrics and by time. So if
Yeah.
somebody says to you or to me, hey, we need to carve out 30 minutes to do this thing, training, anything else, I have that 30 minutes. My time is a little bit more fluid, right? Nobody's measuring the number of widgets that I've moved or the number of transactions that I've completed or the number of things I've picked out of the warehouse and put on a truck, right? All of those activities. The frontline employees in your organization are very likely being measured by those exact types of metrics. And
Yeah.
so they have an 8 or 10 hour day. They have to go do that, all the work in that 8 or 10 hour day, and then they have to learn. And I actually think that's one of the problems. And I'm curious to get your take on it since you mentioned that before, is how we improve their experience as an employee, the effectiveness for their learning by not making it require incremental time, right?
Yeah.
But by convincing the business, the stakeholders in the business to say, no, that hour that we're going to take them off the floor, take them out of the truck, take them out of the field calling on customers, it's an investment in the future, in them, in their ability to produce for the company, in
Right.
their ability to develop into a more strategic role in the company, if that's what they aspire to do, right? To serve our customers better, like all the outcomes that come from that. What are your thoughts on that personally? And then perhaps maybe you can share, some of your company's perspective on that. And if you feel like that's a battle you have to fight inside your organization.
I'll try to keep this like nice and narrow.
Okay.
So the change in management, like I mentioned before, is very important, especially in manufacturing here. So as the company grows, more of a strain goes into manufacturing because we're taking these, maybe some of the companies that were buying their goods third party, we're putting that in-house. So we actually produce about 80, 90% of our items in-house.
Wow.
It's a big,
Okay.
yeah,
So you
big
guys are
part of our,
kind of an integrated solution where you're actually producing the product and siding and sunrooms
yeah,
and things like that. And then you have a full installation team that's doing the design and build also.
right. It's everything
Okay.
is in-house.
Okay.
And it's a very important to the business model. The only part of that is that it does put a big strain on manufacturing. So do they want this? Yes. Does the management on the floor want this? Yes. But when it's very busy, the truth is that like you said, pulling them out for an hour that will hit production numbers. So the change in management has taken a few years now to convince and slowly integrate this in. Uh, the change agents that were a part of the manufacturing floor, that was a huge influence because that was you were standing next to that person. They had a different shirt on, so they walk up to them, they ask questions. It's this instant answer that they can get without taking time away. So they would go to a meeting once a week, learn something high value, what the company is doing, maybe what's coming up next, leadership skills, anything like that. And then they would take that back to the floor. And the idea was that that knowledge would instantly be spread amongst the other employees, right? New employee would come in, they would instantly engage and say, this is what we're doing and this is where we're going. So they didn't have to take that time away, right? So that was the change agent's objective, overall. Um, but it is a challenge. So we are launching a new program here at the end of this month that will be a 6 to 8 month program for manufacturing for supervisors and managers. And the idea is to get them enough knowledge to pass down to their employees without stopping the clock. So it got to a point where yes, we do need it. Do we have time? But when is enough to say it's almost hurting when you say we don't have time now. You have to have that continuous learning. You have to have that knowledge that's desperately missing in most manufacturing environments. Um, and these are employees that drive the business. They make our products. They test the quality. You're buying a $40,000 patio enclosure. You don't want to scratch on it.
Right.
You don't want the wrong size window when it finally arrives 6 weeks later. And they're doing great in there. So we're getting to a point now where it's happening in manufacturing. And Justin, it's a relief to finally see this change happening and taking foot into the learning capability that's happening now. Not only do a lot of these employees have access to our LMS, they all have access, but I've been noticing that more and more are getting on to take classes to engage into the LMS. They're asking more questions, they're being more open. We're having a lot more feedback. They do town hall meetings where you can just raise your hand and ask a question. This engagement is happening in manufacturing more and more and more. But we had to do it the right way or it wasn't going to stick, right?
Yeah.
And I hate to say it, but it does take a couple years sometimes. You have to kind of slowly pull that in there.
Well, we're humans and we're dealing with other humans. And it's not like it's just flipping a switch and we're going to come in on Monday and all of a sudden you're going to have established all this amazing trust and comfort, right, in this environment. And that's a big part of what you're describing. And I've learned from a lot of the change management experts that I've been fortunate enough to interview on this show is a lot of this boils down to trust. And what you are explaining today is like a clinic in how to communicate effectively. Think about it in the long-term view, not think that you're just going to go put up some posters in the break rooms and all of a sudden you're going to see, this change in behavior,
Yeah.
right? It's a long-term investment in the culture of the company. And over time, it starts to build on itself. I mean, I'm visualizing this like snowball effect as you're describing this story. And man, it sounds like you guys have done an amazing job. You've mentioned something that I've not heard before, and I want to just double down on this for a second. The idea of those change agents actually wearing a different colored shirt,
Mm.
that is a freaking awesome idea. The visual symbolic impact of that for both the wearer of the shirt and then also like the visual cues on the shop floor and stuff like that. That is really pretty neat. Is there anything else more to share on that? Because that's just a great concept that I hadn't really thought of before.
Yeah. So it actually is a lean concept, and I guess the change agent is a term that can be used anywhere, right? In
Sure.
office work can be a change agent having this impact and influence. And how they were chosen in the first place was you might not have to be the top tier worker, but you might have major influence, right? So you have the, Venn diagram of the A, B, and C, the A worker being this, negative, they come in, they complain, they kind of pull people down with them. The B people, the B employees being they don't know, they're kind of on the fence. They just show up,
Yep.
and the C workers being, this highly motivated group. yeah, they're fighting for that B group, right? And A is always going to win. It's always easier to complain, right?
Yep.
So what we wanted to do was get these major influencers into that team, that everybody knows them, they're loud, they're involved, they know everybody. And if you can convince them that what we're doing here, this change is really going to happen, then they're going to go out there and influence everybody else. It's just like the popular person, you want to follow the popular person, right?
Yeah.
Um, and when they started wearing the shirts, because that came about 2 months later. So when the project started, when they wore the shirts, the best part was everybody was asking, "What's that? How do I get in that group? How do I do that?" Um, and we would coach the employees to say, "Hey, if you want to be a part of this, step it up." You know, not only are we engaging in meeting our production, but we're also engaging in things like continuous learning and ethical behavior. So it, it not only were you becoming a better person, you're becoming a better person at home as well and outside. You're engaging maybe in volunteer activities now around the neighborhood. You are reading a book before you go to bed instead of maybe playing video games. So it's changing a total behavior of a group and then influencing that, then showing people, that this is what we're doing here. You can be a part of this if you want to,
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
it's
It's
very
fascinating. Such a, again, important examples of things that can be done to influence a culture over time and not think of it as just a one and done activity, a 30 or 60-day initiative, but something that really becomes ingrained in the culture. And it sounds like you guys are doing an amazing job there. And so we've talked a little bit about the field sales folks kind of out and about 24/7. You mentioned, but we didn't dig in deeply to the installation crews that are out in the field. I suspect there's probably like project foremen, project managers, and stuff like that that are running projects out in the field. We've talked about people in the plant and the warehouse where the manufacturing's happening. All of them would fall under the category of a frontline worker, right? They're interacting with the product and they're interacting with customers and stuff like that in the field. I'm wondering though, if you see a distinction between the plant or the folks that are working inside a building versus those folks that are working out and about. And part of it is actually something that you've now talked about, which, we talked about the folks wearing, the separate shirts. My belief is that there's some distinction between those folks that can look across the room and see one of their colleagues and get help with something, right? And that's
yeah.
exactly the scenario that you're describing and that you're fostering. But the field salesperson that's out in the field, they're out and about often by themselves. The
Mhm.
installation team may have members that are out by themselves and may not have that project foreman, may not have another project foreman within earshot that he or she can ask for, hey, how do we do this? And, how can I get the information that I need? Do you have any way to distinguish them? And do you profile them differently in a way to kind of give them different learning experiences because one is near their colleagues and one is not?
Right. It's definitely I wouldn't say it's newer, it's been around for a while. And I don't think we separate them as so much we recognize it, right? It's something that we have to learn to.
Yeah, profile is probably the wrong word because I know there's
Yeah.
some negative connotations with
Yeah.
profiling, but recognize, I think, is a good way to describe it. Recognize the uniqueness of their roles
Right, right.
and environment.
Yeah, we recognize the challenge, right? So
Yeah.
it's a challenge that we work on. Um, and these are things that aren't ignored for sure. We have VCTs set up to where we come together and we discuss these types of issues and we try to solve them. So we bring multiple brand leaders together. Some might not even be leaders, some might just be wanting to help out, bring them online and try to discuss these. And one of them is that, right? So the communication, they might feel siloed. They're at home or they're on the road and they don't feel engaged, right? So how do we work that into making them feel more involved? And one of them is that we have these opportunities for, hey, if you want to jump on and help out, like maybe like a VCT and join this group, let's do it. Jump on and help us out. They might be on their cell phone on the road, but they'll feel engaged. Um, And we have more programs coming out specifically for this. Our internal communications and culture manager is working on a project now where um, it's like a remote change agent group where, from all the different brands, if you want to help out and create change, then you can do that. And it probably will be remote and we'll jump on all together and let's work on this stuff. So it's similar to the concept in manufacturing, but it's going to be remote. And that's going to be launching soon. And not everything is going to be something that somebody's into, right? They might not be into raising their hand and being highly motivated for change. But we do have things like our CEO does, Michael Hoy. He does Hanging with Hoy once a month. You can jump on there once a month and just engage. You can ask a question, you can raise your hand, you can listen to what's going on. And the purpose is to keep people engaged. We don't want to lose them. We don't want them to feel siloed, you know. But you're right. It's a very common thing now where remote workers, the value of their work is just that sometimes. And I was having this conversation with um my manager, I think just a few days ago, where I like to come into the office. I like to see people face to face. Um, but some will sit at home and that's okay. If they don't want that because their work is just work. They want to only do what they're tasked to do and then to get paid for that task because it adds value to the company. And that's okay as well. But if you're talking about culture, which is that's a word that could be used anywhere at any time, um, then you do want some sort of value and creation and camaraderie and everybody working together seamlessly for the goal of what? The company growing, you growing. And to engage in that, we have to not only convince people that we're doing these things, but we actually have to do them and then continue to do them. Like you said, not 3 to 6 months. We have to continue to roll out newsletters and have people in the newsletters that are being recognized, for their hard work and effort. We have to continue to have like the Hanging with Hoy once a month and have people come on and talk to our CEO, and just ask questions. We have to continue to have these learning programs because if any of these die at any time, people are they're gonna say, hey, this was just a joke. This was just to get us engaged and they're not serious about this.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I get sorry man, I get pretty caught up in that because that's what companies need. You're here 8, 10 hours a day,
Yeah.
like give me some sort of engagement. Give me more than just this data that I'm working on, give me more than just this piece of metal that I'm cutting, you know?
Yeah. I think that's one of the things that I've seen that, just anecdotally in my own observations, being out in the field, doing some ride alongs with delivery drivers and field service technicians and stuff like that. And then also getting a chance to be part of conversations that happen at corporate in these organizations. I think sometimes there are like these myths or assumptions that the corporate employees think that the folks in the field don't want more, that they don't want more engagement because they are accustomed to seeing a lack of engagement by the women and men on the front lines. And so I
Mm,
understand a little bit about where that comes from, but I think we have to flip around the cause and effect a little bit. That the reason they're not engaging sometimes is because we're treating them like redheaded stepchildren, right? We're not treating them as members of the corporation in the same way. We're
yeah,
not giving them access to the same tools and communication. So we're not necessarily intentionally alienating them, but by the actions that we're taking, I think oftentimes that's the unintended consequence of the way that we structure things in a large corporation.
right.
And again, going back to this is why we created a show called Frontline Innovators, was to really kind of highlight those people that have found unique ways to reach that workforce that is separate from the corporate office and find more effective ways to engage with them. And then, what happens is it's amazing. And you're, speaking to all these examples is that when you give them opportunities, all of a sudden they start to light up and engage. It's like,
Yeah,
what if we've been doing this all along, right? Maybe we wouldn't be thinking of them the same way that we had before, which is like, oh, well, they never want to learn anything. They never want to grow in their position. Well, that's maybe because we're not giving them the opportunities to do that. Maybe we're not conveying how they can go about doing that. So you guys have clearly made some very strategic and smart investments to help create that culture and recognize that it wasn't going to just happen instantly, but that, you continue to build on what you're doing already. And I think that's really exciting. And I'm very excited to have, hear the story from you. We only do have a few minutes left, but there's one thing I just wanted to touch on. We got to talk about this a little bit when we first met, is really the ROI about these investments. And this is one of those weird things. I feel like we shouldn't have to talk about it, but we do. And maybe I have a little bit of a particular jaded view on this because I represent my day job outside of the podcast, a technology vendor trying to present a new way of doing things to companies. And so, one of the objections that we get is, well, how are we going to justify this new investment, right? Certainly understandable. But I
Yeah,
think that holds true across a lot of areas where it's like, hey, we know we don't have engagement. In my case, we're solving the problem of technology adoption. Well, we know nobody's using the technology the way that we want. And like, I'm still having to make a case for the why you
yeah.
should invest in technology to fill that. But I'm curious about just hearing examples of how companies who are making investments in technology and in practices and in people and in programs, how you're justifying that inside your organization. Or do you just have such great support from the CEO that I think you said it's a man that he's saying, you know, just no, we need to make these investments. And so maybe it's easy because it's coming from top down, but how does that work? And how are you justifying those things to make sense of it?
Yeah, yeah. I definitely went to some senior leaders about 2.5 years ago, 2 years ago, and I said, "How do you measure this?" I said that to them. And I mean, I could have been shooting myself in the foot there. It was a hard
Yeah,
question
for sure.
because I was going to be charging this, but I still said, I asked them, how do you measure culture and how do you measure learning? You know, and the answer I got was, it takes years to collect that data, and you can't engage in something like this and expect 6 months from now everyone to be highly engaged, highly motivated, and want to stay here. That's not how that works. Um, what we have noticed is, but just that though, the engagement has went up. And the more people that know about it, then the more people want to talk about it, engage, and ask questions. Um, Another thing I haven't said before is that our goal is to be a destination employer. So we want people to seek us out. Um, and when we have programs like this, then we're going to attract the highest qualified candidates, right? So we want people to come to us. We want a rock solid, uh, way above the norm sales training. That way, the best salesmen will go, I want to work for them because I make a lot of money and they will train me and the communication is there. We want a manufacturing plant to where people can go, hey, it's manufacturing, but I'm still making a good wage and I can provide for my family. And not only can I do that, but they also offer programs for learning and development as well.
I'm getting
You know,
developed, right?
yeah. So it's more of a just doubling down on that. So the engagement's there. We proved that with like the middle management program, having around 100 people to come to each session, and all of them were all over each brand. Um, that was huge. The coaching program that we offered, where when I asked people to become a coach, not only did I get over 100 signups to become a coach, but I got well over that for people that wanted to be coached. The idea that, hey, I can grow, and not only was it being coached uh, by maybe a senior, but it was cross brands. So you might be getting coached from somebody in Minnesota and you're in Cincinnati, so very cool there. But it is more of a bet. Every stat shows right now that an employee is 12 times more likely if they don't have learning and development opportunities. McKinsey did that. They did that survey for 1 year, and they found out that the second highest reason why people left a company was because they did not have development opportunities. So not only do we want to keep our employees here and engaged, but we want to attract employees. And I'm going to guess in about a year, we're going to see these true results of how well we are doing with this. And I'll say by all means, I'm learning almost daily, with what we need to do right and wrong and how to engage and not engage.
Yeah.
So it will take a few more years. I would say about a year. Maybe at the end of this year, we can get some raw data that suggests if these programs are working, and maybe they're not working in some departments. And maybe we have to start focusing on those departments alone. Maybe that department feels siloed, but we're definitely aware of it. We're definitely recognizing it. And we're recognizing it not just to look at it as data on a piece of paper and go, okay, well, we don't have to worry about that. We worry about that. We worry about if a department's not engaging and there's a high turnover rate. What can we do to solve that issue? We do not ignore that. Maybe to some employees we do because it's not this instant gratification.
Right.
But we're working on it, and we're going to try to solve it because we're going to try to be the best. That's the mentality.
Yeah. Well, kudos to you, man, and to the whole organization. I mean, it sounds like you just have such fantastic top-down support, and that's really what's necessary to really develop the culture that Great Day Improvements is looking to develop. So it's a very encouraging episode on this podcast today. It was it's really uplifting to hear the focus on the men and women across your entire organization and the investments that you've made, and really exciting to hear that. So thank you for sharing that story today with me and our audience.
You're welcome.
Excellent. All right. Well, we do need to wrap it up there. And to our audience, thank you so much for investing the time with us today to explore Justin's experiences and ideas around engagement and adoption with frontline teams. Hopefully you can take an idea from today, and I'm sure there were plenty of them that you can take and put to work with your frontline teams that you support. And unless this is your first episode, you probably already know that this podcast is sponsored by Skillful, the only end-to-end systems training platform optimized for frontline operations. You can learn more about us and what we're doing to help you solve your frontline systems training challenges by visiting skillful.com. That's SKYLLFUL.com. Justin, thanks again for your time today, man. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Justin.